be afraid. Don't be afraid. We won't harm you. Do what we say. Just do what we say. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. We won't harm you. Do what we say. Just do what we say. We won't harm you. We won't harm you.
Jim Weiner had been having strange and reoccurring dreams for nearly 2 years. The dream was so vivid and disturbing that it had started to affect his mental well-being. It always featured the same strange creatures, and the same room, as well as flashes of his twin brother, and 2 other men he knew. Jim found the dreams extremely vivid, but they were so startling that the only person he would confide in was his wife, fearing people might think he was crazy if he mentioned it. As it turned out, Jim's brother Jack had been having identical dreams that had worried his wife Mary. It wasn't until the wives of the 2 brothers mentioned the dreams to each other while catching up over the phone that they realised there was something more to this situation, something possibly paranormal. After grappling with the fact that the dreams were mutual, the 2 brothers discussed it more and realised that it may have had something to do with a peculiar encounter they had had years earlier, but had dismissed as just one of those things. The twin brothers didn't realise just how much of an impact these seemingly repressed memories would have on the rest of their lives. In August 1976, 4 college art students would go on an epic camping trip that they had been planning for months in advance. In the first part of the trip, the men would climb Mount Katahdin, and then set their sights on taking in the pristine wilderness of the Allagash waterways nearby via 2 Grumman canoes, one which was rented and the other on loan from a friend. The group consisted of Charlie Foltz, Jim Weiner, Chuck Rack, and Jack Weiner. The 4 young men were eager to explore the remote wilderness, away from the trials and tribulations of humanity, and where possible, would always elect to set up camp away from other people. This intent to be isolated was possibly a factor that would lead to the way events would unfold over the next few days. They were so isolated, in fact, that the 4 had to take a small float plan only capable of carrying 2 men, their gear, and a canoe at a time, meaning 2 plane trips were needed for their adventure to begin. This seclusion would afford them the ability to take in their natural surroundings, but would also mean that whatever happened over the course of the trip, they would have to deal with it virtually on their own. After arriving, the 4 would set up camp for the first night at Chamberlain Lake, getting used to their surroundings in what would be their home for the better part of the next 2 weeks. On the second day, the campers made their way to Mud Pond for the night, looking to make camp out of the increasing winds. While here, the 4 men bumped into some people also camping in the area, who were looking for others in their party before sundown. Jim Weiner recalled trying to spot the missing party members using his binoculars, and while scanning the horizon, he spotted a bizarre, glowing, yellow-white light in the sky, a sight he later noted felt distinctly unnatural. A balloon wasn't a plausible explanation for the object, as it was moving into the wind, instead of with it. It didn't make any sound either, which eliminated the possibility of an aircraft. At the exact moment Jim brought the binoculars into sharp focus, the object seemed to implode inward and disappear without a trace. So what it could be was a mystery to the group. Although the strange light did seem out of the ordinary, the group still had yet to set up camp for the night, and the missing campers being found at the same time as the sighting made it easy to dismiss with everything going on. But the strange activity in the area would not be as easy to disregard as more time passed on the Allagash. On the third day of the trip, the men attempted to canoe to Allagash Lake via the Allagash stream, but failed to push against the harsh current with paddles alone. The passage only passable using canoe poles, a classic technique where a paddler stands up to push against the riverbed. After retiring from the Allagash stream expedition, the four men set up camp and decided to head north to Eagle Lake the day after, in an attempt to truly escape the other campers in the area, and be on their own with the wilderness. Eagle Lake coincidentally being the area that the bright light was seen hovering over the night before. Initially, they had planned on Thoreau campsite, but noticed another camper there, so the group paddled even further into the Allagash, eventually reaching Smith Brook, a considerable distance away from any of the handful of people also in the area. Almost as if the men were being guided that way by something that understood how compelled they were to be alone. Isolated and deep in the woods of northern Maine, the four men set up their camp. After setting up camp for the night at Smith Brook campsite, the group built a well-fueled campfire that they estimated would burn for around 3 to 4 hours. This fire was pivotal in their plan for the night, as they would use it as a makeshift lighthouse while on the water, hoping to supplement their evening meal with a fresh catch of fish from Eagle Lake. Charlie recalled it taking about 25 minutes for the four men to paddle carefully to an ideal fishing spot, looking out for floating logs in the dark lake waters, and generally taking their time and enjoying the moment. Setting up roughly 500 yards from their campsite, the men kept a clear view of the blazing fire to navigate back. While fishing on the water, Chuck felt an eerie sensation of being watched, forcing him to glance back over his shoulder, where he spotted a strange object hovering across the night sky, and quickly alerted the rest of the crew. Charlie recalled that somehow all four men knew exactly where to look the moment Chuck mentioned it. The bright object was exactly like the one they had seen 48 hours earlier at Mud Pond, but this time much closer, its luminosity bathing the treetops in radiant light. Jim recalled the object making no sound whatsoever, even though it was close enough to illuminate nearby trees. Curious if the object would respond to some form of visual communication, Charlie picked up his flashlight and then used his hand to occlude the light from it in the distinct pattern of an SOS signal. At this exact moment, the light in the sky began quickly approaching them, as if the SOS signal functioned as some form of agreement. With the approach so swift, as well as a cone-shaped beam now projecting from the luminous sphere, the men's curiosity quickly turned into fear as they attempted to flee the object. Chuck's reaction was slightly different, a sensation he later described as absolute elation, and that he couldn't believe that they were really going to find out what it was after signaling it. This strong response made Chuck physically unresponsive to the others' calls for assistance in paddling, which would be futile in any case, since the object was moving toward them so quickly. Jack recalled the moment they realized they weren't going to outrun this thing, and the fear that accompanied that thought. Charlie stated that he was focused on the camp and had vivid memories of paddling towards it in an attempt to flee the pursuit. The next thing the men remember is standing on the shore, looking up at the object, evidently being able to escape the chase. Now on shore once again, and feeling safer, Charlie was curious to see if he could elicit another response via visual communication, and again picked up the flashlight. As before, he used the occluded light from his torch to create an SOS signal, but this time his attempts to communicate went unacknowledged. Rather than approaching, The object started moving away slowly across the dark water until reaching the other side of the lake, where it accelerated to an impossible velocity, strangely stepping its altitude as if moving up a staircase. Jim later recalled that its movement reminded him of a frisbee in motion, skipping up in height. Oddly, the campfire they had built to burn for 3 to 4 hours was already completely spent, though they had only been on the lake for 30 minutes. The men did find that strange, and the fact that they had somehow made it back to shore in such good time was also baffling, but their overwhelming feeling of fatigue outweighed the urge to investigate these matters further, not discussing the event that just unfolded at all. The 4 men were determined to get to their respective tents and sleep as soon as possible, even themselves later noting that it was rather peculiar for a group of young men to not even discuss an event such as this. The men continued camping in the Allagash wilderness for another 10 days, not seeing the strange light again for the rest of the trip. But in the back of their minds, the 4 all had questions about the event that weren't able to be answered. What was the bright light, and how did it move close enough to the trees to illuminate them in silence? How did they manage to outrun it and get back to shore when it was catching up to them so quickly? Why was the fire, which was made to burn for hours, exhausted within only half an hour? These details didn't make sense, but the urge to follow up on them seemed to be clouded, as if they had been programmed to disregard it. The men did mention the event to friends and family, but they were largely unconvinced of the story. Then the nightmares began, leading the 4 men on a journey spanning decades that delved into their own minds for the truth. Join us next time for part 2 of the Allagash Abduction case, as we answer these questions and more on Tall Tales.